Today we're going to be talking about cancer and some of the early things that we did when Brianna was diagnosed. But to start, we kind of want to give you a little background about that whole process.
Yes. Okay. So I had a mole on my leg. It appeared right after my divorce in 2017, right?
Yeah, around that.
Yeah. And it was skin colored. I didn't think it was anything because it did not look like a melanoma. And so I let it sit there for like a year. And then Alex talked me into going in and getting it checked out, and they biopsied it, and it came back as a spitzoid lesion. They didn't know it was melanoma yet, and so they had pathologists look at it and take second, third looks, and came back on August 5th as melanoma, and they staged it as stage 3. I have been interested in cancer for a long time, since before I was diagnosed, and so I was aware of deuterium depletion helping cancer patients. It's mainly research papers that show it, but I found this book right here, Defeating Cancer. It's the only book on deuterium depletion that I know of. And I started researching it.
Yeah, so the whole idea of deuterium depletion kind of goes along the lines of how molecules in our body are necessary for a host of processes to take place. So when you think of hydrogen, hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the body. You know, by weight, it makes up about 10% of your body. But because hydrogen is the lightest element on a volume or an atomic scale, it makes up like 60% of the atoms in your body or something. And it takes a role in a host of processes. And deuterium is basically an isotope of hydrogen, meaning that if hydrogen just under normal circumstances, it has one proton in the nucleus and that's it, deuterium has a neutron along with it. And because most of a molecule's weight comes from its protons and neutrons, that basically makes deuterium twice as heavy as hydrogen. And so that gives it the nickname heavy hydrogen. But hydrogen's involved in a lot of things. Just off the top of my head, enzyme function. So all of your proteins are going to have some hydrogens in them that require hydrogen to be able to alter their structure and function properly.
Which
DNA,
plays into DNA.
Yeah, DNA uses hydrogen bonding to bind the nucleotide pairs to form the double helix. And then you also have mitochondria. The entire purpose of the electron transport chain in mitochondria is to shove hydrogens from the inside of the mitochondria into this intermembrane space that sits between the inner mitochondrial membrane and their outer membrane shell. And when you have a bunch of hydrogens in that space, what it does is it forms a concentration gradient where those hydrogens then move back into the mitochondria through what's called Atp synthase. And that's what generates ATP, which is basically the energy currency of the cell. And so where deuterium comes into play in all of this is basically it gunks up the system. Focusing mostly on mitochondria and energy metabolism, we have research showing that when a deuterium molecule enters into ATP synthase, it slows it down. It makes this little rotating motor that protein structure has, it makes it stutter, and it impedes
so it
energy.
Slows down the mitochondrial function.
Yeah, it impairs mitochondrial function and slows down energy production.
It also alters the DNA, and that's why deuterium depletion has been shown to change the COX-2 genes.
Yeah.
And lead to less prostaglandins too. There's a bunch of hypotheses on why deuterium depletion works, and that's one of them.
Yeah, it basically comes down to 3 things. Deuterium negatively impacts energy production, the ability to replicate DNA in an appropriate way that minimizes the chance of having mutations occur, which could lead to cancer, and deuterium messes with enzyme function. So those 3 ways, are the main ways that deuterium kind of messes with our health. So when you do what's called deuterium depletion, you're basically trying to get this deuterium out of your body so that it can't do that, so that there's normal hydrogen there to perform these functions properly. And so that was kind of one of the first things that we looked into doing for Brianna, because there is very preliminary but consistently promising research with regards to deuterium depletion on cancer, both in terms of test tube studies showing how it affects cancer growth, as well as
they have human
studies in actual humans showing that it reduces mortality, prolongs lifespan, and leads to higher success rates in terms of remission-free survival.
And this is paired with conventional treatment, and I think that is important to point out, that it's not just a holistic treatment that you deplete your body of deuterium and you're saved.
Yeah, it's
That's
used.
not it.
Yep, it's used
you use it in conjunction with conventional.
Yeah. So this isn't something like, oh, screw you, doctor, like I'm going to go deplete my deuterium. No, doesn't work like that.
The studies are done alongside conventional medicine.
Yeah. So how do you deplete deuterium? With water. There's, searching around the internet, you can kind of find a lot of information on how to deplete deuterium. A lot of people say you need to go on a ketogenic diet to maximize the effects, because
that's really big in the biohacker circle, and it's because they don't understand it. They're just regurgitating what their guru said, and their guru's wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So the idea of doing a ketogenic diet is that when you go through the whole energy production process, there's like a small net gain of water, primarily when you oxidize fatty acids as an energy source. And that water is going to be deuterium depleted. So over time on a ketogenic diet, you produce more metabolic water that's depleted of deuterium. At the same time, because fat doesn't contain notable amounts of deuterium because it's created from this metabolic water and these hydrogens that are deuterium depleted, then fat itself doesn't contain much deuterium at all. I think I was able to locate a study looking at lard from pork, and deuterium concentrations are about 120 parts per million. When you look at carbohydrate-containing foods, they're 140 to 155.
And foods, seawater's around 150, right?
155 is the ocean standard. Icelandic water, like from Antarctica, is around 89, I think. But basically, there's actually been one study that goes through all of the indigenous populations around the world. Well, not all of them, but a lot. And they look at their diet and the water that they drink. And what they found is that 90% of the deuterium levels of indigenous people were determined by their drinking water concentration, not by their diet. So it seems kind of weird to adopt a ketogenic diet when 90% of any deuterium effect is going to be determined by the water you drink.
Yeah, and so where they came up with that too, not just from the fats, but down by the equator, fruit has more deuterium concentration because of the precipitation, correct?
Yeah, tropical fruit is one of the highest.
That has higher deuterium, so they say all carbs have higher deuterium too, which isn't true.
But that's not true. But they do have higher amounts than fats. That is a true statement. It's not a lot. It's like 120
You're gonna
average
get your
versus 150
best bang for your buck with water.
And water does most of the thing. And funny tidbit, great evidence against the use of a ketogenic diet is that out of all the indigenous societies tested, the Inuit population had the highest deuterium levels despite eating a ketogenic diet. And
so if a ketogenic diet was
so important, then why? And that's even though their drinking water also had the lowest concentrations. But that does give weight to why diet matters. because it was hypothesized that they ate a lot of seafood from the ocean. The ocean has a higher deuterium content. That seafood's swimming in it. So the water of that seafood's gonna have higher deuterium. So because their diet is so heavily biased towards ocean fish, it's not enough to counteract the slightly lower deuterium content of their drinking water. So they have higher concentrations overall. And a ketogenic diet cannot get rid of that.
Yeah, and so what I did is I tested my deuterium. I don't think you should guess on anything, ever. I tested it. The only place that I know of to test through is the Deuterium Depletion Center, and they are heavily biased against or for ketogenic diets. I do agree that a lot of cancer patients are probably coming from a standard American diet where their insulin is elevated and they are over fat. And so following that kind of diet where they lose fat probably would be beneficial. But if you're lean and active, then I don't think it's necessarily going to do anything to follow a strict ketogenic diet.
I think that just generally speaking, trying to keep your insulin levels lower is going to have benefits in cancer, but I
do that anyways, so I guess I should clarify that. Yeah. What I mean, like I eat low glycemic carbs. I've always done that because I feel better.
Yeah, and that's irrelevant for deuterium. Like that's just generally a good idea, but you can do that with carbohydrates. You just need to
choose the right ones.
Yeah, and know how your body responds to them. I mean, we have research showing that some people get spikes from eating tomatoes but not cookies, right? So it is very individualized. So yeah, that was kind of our little talk on deuterium depletion.
If you have any questions, ask in the comments.
And before we go, we promised one of our friends, Sumi, that we would show her our kittens.
Oh, yeah.
So give us a moment.
Where's the little one? Here's baby Gaia. Say hi to Sumi.
And here's little Tara. Tara.